In the village of Zango, there was a woman named Salima. She was as poor as the dusty ground beneath her feet. Her clothes resembled old rags, full of holes and tears, barely covering her body. Her heart was more of a shell than a home. The roof leaked whenever the sky cried, and the cold wind blew through the torn windows, as if mocking her. Salima had no bed. She slept on the hard, bare floor, curling up like a hungry cat to keep warm. Every night, she prayed for a better life, but each morning greeted her with the same struggle. Salima tried everything to survive. She fetched water for people, washed their clothes, and even worked on their farms. Yet, no matter how hard she worked, her hands always came back empty. It was as if the world had turned its back on her. Her age mates, the women she grew up with, were all married, living comfortably with their families. They wore fine clothes, their children laughing and playing around them. But Salima had no husband, no child, no one to call her own. The villagers whispered behind her back, "She's cursed," they said, "born with bad luck." Even the men kept their distance, fearing her misfortune would rub off on them. Salima's life was a tale of sorrow. She walked through the village like a shadow, unnoticed, unloved, and unwanted. Yet despite everything, she carried on, hoping that one day the sun would shine brighter on her life. But that day had not come, at least not yet. One hot afternoon, Salima carried her bundle of tattered clothes to the river. The sun beat down fiercely, and the river sparkled like a pot of melted silver. She knelt by the water, scrubbing her rags with hands as rough as the village roads. The sound of the rushing water was the only comfort she had. As Salima washed, she heard the soft rustle of footsteps behind her. She turned quickly, her heart skipping like a frightened bird. There, standing tall and proud, was a woman dressed in clothes so fine they seemed to belong to a queen. Her skin glowed, her jewelry sparkled, and her smile was as sharp as a knife. "Good day," the woman said, her voice smooth like honey. Salima blinked, unsure if she was dreaming. "Good day, ma," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman stepped closer. "My name is Kemi. I've been watching you, Salima. I know your struggles." Salima's eyes widened. How did this stranger know her name? Kemi smiled, as if reading her thoughts. "I have a business for you. It's simple and will change your life." Salima stared, her mind spinning. What kind of business? Kemi reached into her bag and pulled out a bundle of crisp notes. "You will collect used panties from the villagers. Bring as many as you can, and for every load, I will pay you handsomely." Salima's jaw dropped. "Panties?" she asked, confusion thick in her voice. "Yes," Kemi said firmly. "Don't ask questions. Just do as I say, and you'll never be poor again." With that, she handed Salima the money and turned to leave. "Remember," she said, "I'll be waiting." Salima sat by the river, clutching the money, her mind clouded with questions. What kind of business was this? Why panties? She didn't understand, but the weight of the money in her hand was real, and for the first time in her life, hope stirred in her chest. She packed her clothes and headed home, her heart beating like a talking drum. What would she do next? The next morning, Salima woke up with a plan. She knew the villagers might grow suspicious if she asked for only panties, so she decided to make her trade seem ordinary. With the money Kemi had given her, Salima went to the market and bought colorful buckets and bowls, big and small, each one shining under the morning sun. When she returned to the village, she knocked on the first door. An old woman opened, her eyes narrowing at Salima. "Good morning, Mama," Salima greeted, holding up a bright blue bucket. "I'm exchanging these for any old clothes, shoes, or even panties you don't need." The old woman grunted. "Old clothes, shoes, panties." She shook her head. "What kind of business is that?" "It's for a new venture," Salima said, her voice steady. "If you have anything you're not using, I'll trade you for this fine bucket." The old woman's eyes lit up at the sight of the bucket. Without hesitation, she went inside and returned with a pile of old clothes and shoes, topped with a few worn-out panties. "Thank you, Mama. Here's your bucket," Salima said, smiling. At each house, it was the same. The villagers eagerly handed over their useless items for Salima's shiny bowls and buckets. By the end of the day, her sack was full, bulging with clothes, shoes, and, most importantly, panties. That night, Salima sat in her hut, sorting through her collection. She carefully separated the panties and placed them in a special sack. The other clothes and shoes she took. If you've made it this far, I encourage you to like and subscribe to the channel to continue enjoying fascinating content like this. Your support is very important to us. Them outside and burned them in a hidden spot near the river. The flames crackled, consuming the evidence while Selima watched, her face glowing in the firelight. The next day, she delivered the sack of panties to Kemi by the river. "You've done well," Kemi said, her voice smooth as silk. She handed Selima a thick bundle of money. Selima's heart raced as she clutched the payment. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling hope rise in her chest. Kemi smiled, her eyes sharp. "Keep working, Selima. Your life is about to change." And so, Selima's trade continued, each day bringing her closer to a life she never thought possible, while the villagers remained clueless about the dark secret hidden beneath her newfound success. Before long, the news of Selima's trade spread through Zango like wildfire. Her colorful buckets and shiny bowls became the talk of the village. From the eldest grandmothers to the youngest brides, everyone was eager to exchange their old clothes, shoes, and most of all, panties, for Selima's fine goods. "Have you seen Selima's new bowls?" one woman asked her neighbor. "Yes. I traded my husband's old shirts yesterday and got one." "It's beautiful," the neighbor replied, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Whenever Selima arrived in the village with her buckets, a crowd would gather instantly. Women pushed and shoved, each trying to hand over their old items first. Selima never lacked customers, and her sacks were always full by the end of the day. With Kemi's payments coming in regularly, Selima's life began to change. She repaired her leaky hut, replacing the torn roof with sturdy palm leaves. Her windows were covered, keeping the cold winds out at night. She even bought new clothes, bright and colorful like the women she once envied. For the first time, Selima could eat well. No more begging or struggling. Her days of hunger were over. The villagers noticed her transformation and began to talk. "Look at Selima," they whispered. "She's no longer the poor wretch we knew. Maybe her business is truly blessed," another added. But while her days were filled with laughter and trade, her nights held a darker secret. When the village slept, Selima would quietly gather her sacks of sorted panties. Like a shadow, she slipped through the narrow paths heading toward the river. Under the moonlight, she would meet Kemi, who always waited with her strange knowing smile. They exchanged no more than a few words, but each time, Kemi would take the sack of panties and hand Selima her payment. No one in the village knew of these nightly meetings. To them, Selima's success was a simple tale of hard work. But in the dark by the river, something strange and unspoken was happening, and soon it would catch the attention of a watchful eye. Selima's trade grew bigger than anyone in Zango could have imagined. She didn't stop at her village. Soon she started visiting neighboring villages. Her buckets and bowls gleamed like the morning sun. Everywhere she went, villagers eagerly gathered their old clothes, shoes, and panties, waiting for her next visit. "Selima is coming tomorrow," they would say, the excitement bubbling like a pot of soup. Everyone wanted a piece of her trade. Back in Zango, her life was a marvel. Her once broken-down heart now stood strong and proud. Her clothes were fresh, and her meals were satisfying. But while most villagers celebrated her success, one person's mind was restless, her neighbor Tinu. Tinu had always been a sharp-eyed woman, and she couldn't ignore the strange pattern. Every night, while others slept, Selima would carry her sacks and disappear into the darkness. She would return hours later, her face calm, but her eyes told a story Tinu couldn't understand. Where does she go? Tinu wondered. One night, curiosity gripped her tightly. She wrapped herself in a thick shawl and waited by her window, watching Selima. As expected, Selima left her hut, a heavy sack slung over her shoulder, moving like a silent cat. Tinu followed her, keeping a safe distance. The air was cold, and the night was eerily quiet. Tinu's heart beat loudly in her chest, but she pressed on, hiding behind trees and bushes. Finally, they reached the river. Tinu crouched low, peeking through the tall grass. Her eyes widened when she saw a figure sitting on a large rock by the riverbank. It was Kemi, her rich clothes glowing faintly under the moonlight. Around her, candles flickered, their flames dancing in a perfect circle. Selima approached, dropping her sack in front of Kemi without a word. The scene unfolded like a dark secret, and Tinu watched, her mind racing with questions about what truly lay behind Selima's newfound success. I hope you enjoyed this amazing trip. Subscribe and don't miss our next video. See you next time.